Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
A handsome middle-aged man left the store with two lovely 10-year-old twin girls. They were delightful creatures, two little princesses dressed in pink, lace, and bows. Their white curls were fluttering in the wind. The girls were laughing and discussing their purchases, while their father was smiling. A beggar woman, wrapped in tattered rags, was standing next to the steps leading from the entrance. The sun blinded her eyes, and she squinted, looking at the girls. The beggar woman tried to shield her face with her hand, as the sun was shining right in her eyes. One of the girls suddenly stopped and stared at the beggar woman. The other also stopped, following her sister's gaze, and immediately said this to their father. "Dad, look over there," one of the sisters said. "Dad, Mom is begging for food there," the second one said. Ismail looked at the beggar woman, whose face was bathed in sunlight, and literally froze. It was her, it was really her. There could be no doubt. Ismail could not fail to recognize his wife, the wife who had died 5 years ago. Ismail closed his eyes, momentarily forgetting where he was and who was with him. Thoughts somehow entangled, and memories surged like a turbulent stream, as if filling a mountain river after tropical rainstorms. There he was, a carefree young man, dancing to the waltz rhythm at the school graduation with some classmates. Katerina, Marta, or Marina, it didn't matter at all. He couldn't take his eyes off Gabriella, the art teacher. Ismail was in love, hopelessly in love with her. Gabriella did not have the opportunity to teach fine arts in Ismail's class. Drawing lessons ended in middle school. At that time, Gabriella herself was a graduate. Ismail didn't delve into the intricacies of age. He was 15 then. Yes, he was a year older than his classmates, that's how it turned out. He was often sick as a child and started school at almost 8, not 7. Now he was already 18. He was an adult. He had the legal right to pay attention to the women he liked, and he liked Gabriella. She came to work at the school last year. She was only 21. She had just graduated from college and dealt with teenagers. Ismail went to the sea resort with his parents in September. He missed the main celebration of the beginning of the school year and didn't see Gabriella Vega standing with all the teachers. Ismail came to school in the last week of September, just in time to be late for his first day. He was running up the stairs to his class, and she was coming down. He grabbed her by the waist and spun her a bit. "Hello, newcomer. Do you know where we have physics?" he asked cheerfully. "I have no idea," she replied, raising an eyebrow, slightly surprised. "Well, where are you rushing off to? It's time for the next class, isn't it?" Ismail continued to hold her by the waist, looking at her sky-blue eyes. "To the other class," Gabriella replied cautiously. "Oh, so you're from another class?" Ismail responded. He let her go and ran up the stairs. "Still surprised," he said. "I'm Ismail, everyone knows me around here." "I'm not surprised," the young teacher said. Apologizing and awkwardly smiling, Ismail entered the history classroom. At the beginning of the year, there was complete chaos. The repairs on the 4th floor were not finished yet, so the physics class was moved to the history classroom. "Hello. Can I come in?" Ismail asked. "Well, you're already halfway in. What are you asking for?" "Sit down and put your diary on the table," the elderly physics teacher said. "Yeah, my mom knows I'm late." "We all overslept," Ismail replied. "Maybe your mom knows, but I don't know whether she knows or not, so it's my job to react to your mistakes," the teacher explained. Reluctantly, Ismail tossed his school diary onto the teacher's desk and slumped into his rightful and favorite spot in the back row. His gaze fell on a new person in the class. "Hey, Mauro, who's that hippo on the front desk?" Ismail asked his neighbor. "She's blocking the view. I can't see anything." "That's our new classmate. She moved with her parents. She's a straight A student. It seems smart, but outwardly, oh my lord, a seal on stilts." But don't mess with her, she's the director's niece. So anyone who wants a diploma without any CS should respect and honor her, his neighbor whispered. What's the chatter in the back row? The teacher asked. Ah, I see. Ismail is back in school. Is there a new girl in another class too? That girl is a real beauty. Ismail shared quietly with his friend. Are you out of your mind? There are no new students in another class this year. They took the hippo only as an exception. We're about to graduate, Morrow replied. Ismail, did you forget that your diary is still with me? Or does your mom also know about your chattering in class? The physics teacher barked. Only 2 days later did Ismail find out that the girl he grabbed on the stairs wasn't a student but a teacher. Until almost a new year, he couldn't believe that there were such young teachers. She was only 4 years older than him. Was that really a big difference? But school ethics didn't allow Ismail to express his feelings in any way. On Valentine's Day, he wrote her a valentine. He wanted to send it anonymously, but then thought she wouldn't understand. She might think it was from one of the teachers, the PE teacher, the shop teacher, or maybe the history teacher. So he decided to sign it. She caught him during a lunch break behind the school. Everyone knows what high school students sometimes do there, and Ismail was no exception. Surprisingly, he was alone. It turned out that it wasn't cool to do all that alone. No one showed up. Everyone must have run to the cafeteria. And then she appeared from around the corner in her high-heeled shoes, walking through the snow, wearing a black skirt and a white blouse. Ismail couldn't stop marveling at how she could teach children art with her perfectly white blouse remaining all day without a single paint stain. She approached him and handed him a Valentine's Day card. She was trembling, whether from excitement or cold. Ismail just wanted to embrace her and warm her up. Is it your doing? She asked. Yeah, Ismail replied, continuing to smile foolishly. Without hesitation, she slapped him. You shouldn't have, Gabriella began to say. But Ismail just pulled her close and kissed her. She pushed him away and nervously looked around to see if anyone saw them. You're a foolish boy, she said, stepping back. I'm already 18. Relax, Gabriella, Ismail smirked. She didn't say anything and ran into the school. Since then, Gabriel has avoided him in every possible way. She could even stand on the corner of the school and not go inside, waiting for him to enter. It annoyed Ismail, but he couldn't do anything about it. And now memories take him back to their graduation. He was dancing a waltz with some classmates, but he didn't take his eyes off Gabriella. One girl replaced another, he had dance after dance. And then the DJ announced it would be a slow dance now. Ismail was standing against the wall. She stood up from the table where all the teachers were sitting and walked towards him, exactly towards him. She took his hand and led him to the center of the hall. Her hands were resting on his shoulder. They were slowly spinning around the hall. Ismail didn't even notice when the dance ended, and she slightly moved away. Let me go, everyone is watching, she said quietly. Ismail relaxed his arms, and they slid off her waist. What? Can't we dance? She smiled in response to the astonished looks of the teachers. Gabriella, you surprised us, the principal remarked in complete silence. Oh, come on. From today on, they are no longer students, she calmly commented. Memories instantly transport us from the past to the future and back. Ismail could barely stand on the store steps, and only the warm palms of his daughters in his hands kept him in reality. That's it, Ismail, I quit, Gabriella said from the doorway, entering the house. What? Why? He asked. I can't take these snobs anymore, dodge piercing glances, and endure the silent treatment, she said. But what about the kids? It's mid-year, Ismail reminded her. So what? There are plenty of graduates eager to take my place. They'll find someone. What do I care about other people's children when we'll soon have a wedding, when we'll soon have our own child? She said. Ismail picked her up and began to twirl around the room, just like the first time he saw her on the stairs. They had been living together for 2 years. Ismail was exempt from military service due to his health, although he wasn't sure if his health was really not great or if his parents managed to gather some certificates. But it wasn't that important. Since that graduation day, they have been together. Gabriella was condemned by the entire school. Teacher councils reprimanded and summoned her. They threatened her. She persistently defended her right to feelings and her right to love and be loved for 2 years. But when Gabriella found out she was pregnant, she realized that her own child was much more important than all pedagogical ethics and practices. She wouldn't have maternity leave, but she didn't want to work before her maternity leave in such an atmosphere. What would the child be like, a neurotic, a psychopath, after all that? Moreover, Ismail was making a good living. After school, he went to a factory and achieved stunning success in 2 years, becoming a brigade leader. A promising young man. Besides, she would now have plenty of time to paint her pictures. Then they found out they were expecting twins. Ismail laughed and rejoiced like a child, and Gabriella had been crying all night. It was all due to hormones. She was afraid that her young husband would find a beauty his age and leave her, leaving her alone with 2 children. What are you talking about, Gabriella? You're only 4 years older than me, only 4, Ismail reassured her. We are of the same generation. We are peers. What kind of girl would I be looking for? And most importantly, when would I do it? I have a stable job. Do you mean I'm sitting on your neck? Gabriella cried. Or rather, not she, but her raging hormones. Ismail understood and didn't get angry with his wife. They got married as soon as Gabriella became pregnant, and now they were a real husband and wife. Twin girls were born, Miranda and Natividad. They were sweet, lovely little angels. She could have lived happily. But Gabriella was fading away. She seemed to be dying before his eyes. She could sleep until noon and then hastily start doing household chores so that Ismail, coming home from work, wouldn't think she hadn't done anything. The girls cried in their cribs. Of course, Gabriella didn't have time for anything. What about paintings? What about creativity? She was suffocating. She couldn't live like this anymore. When the girls turned 4, Gabriella had already become addicted to drinking. Ismail saw it all, but he endured it. He endured it for the girls and for himself. He still loved Gabriella. For a year, he took her to clinics, sanatoriums, and hospitals. They treated her, detoxified her, then treated her again, and then she died. As it usually happens, early in the morning, at the most inconvenient moment, they called him from the clinic where she was and told him that Gabriella Vega was dead. She had an overdose. How could that happen? Ismail didn't understand. She was supposed to be discharged tomorrow. We ordered a cake for her with the girls. Well, now you have a reason to commemorate her, the woman joked. Ismail was in complete shock. He couldn't understand what was happening, what to do, where to go, and where to run. Maybe it was just someone's cruel joke. After the funeral, he himself almost drowned his sorrows in alcohol but managed to pull himself together in time. He had the girls. Who would take care of them? For 5 years, he was everything for them, a mom, a dad, a nanny, and everything in the world. How much effort it took him to explain to the little ones what happened to their mom, that now she was looking at them from the sky and would always, always live in their hearts, whatever could happen. He pulled himself together bit by bit. And now, when everything had settled down, when it had been 5 years since that monstrous call that divided their lives into before and after, when the pain subsided, he saw his wife, alive and well. Well, maybe not entirely, but still. And thoughts not only got confused in his head, they just raced there in chaotic order, trying to break out, tearing his head into pieces. How? How was this possible? At first, he thought maybe she was in a coma, not dead, and somehow managed to crawl out of her grave, and now she was like a zombie, not knowing who she was or where she was from. Then Ismail thought, maybe it wasn't her, perhaps a twin sister she didn't know about, and they were separated in childhood. After all, she gave birth to twins herself. Gabriella? Ismail called her softly. Gabriella, is it you? Ismail, my darlings. She exclaimed, rushing to them, falling to her knees, and kissing their feet right there on the steps of the store. Dad, what is Mom doing? One of the daughters asked. Dad, did she fall from the sky? The other girl asked. Ismail and the girls moved to the capital after their mother's death to change the environment and overcome the loss. Ismail found a job and decided to start his own business. They weren't the wealthiest family, but they lived well, not poorly, in a word. And they could never have imagined that such a meeting awaited them in the capital. Judging by the reaction of this beggar woman, she was indeed the same Gabriella, not a sister or even a look-alike. Dad, we won't leave her here, will we? The girls said in unison. Ismail, barely coming to his senses from what he had seen and the memories that surged back, reached out to the homeless woman. Forgive me. Forgive me, please, all of you. Forgive me, the beggar was muttering as she sat in the nice and beautiful car. At home, she went to the bathroom to clean up and tidy herself. Ismail grabbed the rags she was wearing, stuffed them into a bag, and threw them in the garbage bin. Initially, he wanted to buy her clothes, give her some money, and ask her not to appear in their lives again. But when Ismail saw the gleam in the eyes of his daughters, he decided to postpone the decision. Well, such cases, where a deceased mother suddenly resurrected after being dead for 5 years, were rare. Now, as she was sitting with a towel on her head, wrapped in his plush bathrobe, emitting the pleasant scent of shampoo and soap, not of a makeshift latrine, Ismail could see unmistakably his wife before him. His resurrected wife was that same Gabriella, and he needed to do something about it. The girls were sticking to her on both sides, and she kept kissing them and asking for forgiveness. The children didn't understand what to do. Mommy, how was it up there in heaven? One of the daughters asked. Bad, my darlings, very bad, Gabriella replied. Why, Mommy? The girls wondered. There's God in heaven, isn't it? Yes, that's true, but most importantly, you weren't there, Gabriella replied. I can't believe I haven't seen you for so long. How you've grown, what beauties you've become. My dear, beloved ones. Mommy, did it hurt when you fell from the sky? One of the daughters asked. It was painful, my dears, very painful, their mother answered. And how did you fall? The girls asked. Well, I was sitting on a little cloud, watching over you. Suddenly, I wanted to get a closer look at you. I leaned over more than I should have and fell, Gabriella replied. Ismail was watching this scene, wondering what had happened to his wife, what was wrong with her, and how she survived. He understood that talking about this topic in front of the children was simply impossible. Girls, Mom and I will go to the store. She needs to buy clothes, and you stay home for now, Dad said. Then we'll bake lemon cookies, the girls clapped their hands. Okay, sure. Just don't burn the apartment down, Dad said. As they were walking out of the boutique, where Gabriella came right in that same bathrobe, Ismail noticed she no longer differed from the woman he buried 5 years ago. As if those 5 years had never happened. Tell me, do you really regret what you did, or is this some kind of trick? Ismail asked. Can't you see and hear that I'm sincere? Gabriella asked. I can't see or hear anything yet. I'm not a 10-year-old girl who can easily be deceived with stories about heaven, about God, and falling from a cloud, Ismail said. I need to know the full, and most importantly, truthful, version of everything that happened to you. Only then can I make a decision. I don't think you'll like the full version of everything that happened, Gabriella said. They stopped at a small cafe where there weren't too many people. Ismail ordered coffee and a pastry for Gabriella. Oh my God, how long it's been since I had coffee. Really good coffee, Gabriella exclaimed. It feels like you've really been to the other side. Not in heaven, though, but in hell, Ismail remarked. Practically, you're right, Gabriella said mysteriously. So maybe you'll tell me what happened to you and how all this happened. Ismail insisted. Well, hold on, don't push. Let me gather my thoughts a bit, Gabriella said. It's not that simple. I need to confess a lot to you. They were sitting in silence for a while. Gabriella just looked into the distance mysteriously, stirring her drink with a spoon. She still hadn't touched the pastry. You know, she suddenly said without looking at Ismail, I had a child. With these words, Gabriella abruptly looked at Ismail, as if checking his reaction, and immediately looked away. I hope I wasn't the father, he said, pondering what he had heard. Of course not, Gabriella replied. Then who was? Ismail asked, as if he were the only man on the planet who could father children. You see, I fell in love, Gabriella said. Then they were silent for a while. And just as Ismail was about to gather the courage to tell her, if you don't want to talk, then don't. Here's some money, leave us. I'll figure out what to tell the girls. I'll say a cloud flew in, from which you fell, and took you back to the sky. He was about to open his mouth when Gabriella burst out. Apparently, she just needed to get it off her chest. On that fateful day, as it turned out, she was walking along the Central City Avenue. Now she won't remember what it was for. Back then, she was foolish and naive, believing in fairy tales and believing that she was a great artist and everything would work out for her. She was passing by the place where the avenue split in two, and there was a boulevard between two lanes. It was there, probably from the day the city was founded, that street artists had been located. Gabriella used to enjoy walking there before, even in her student years. She admired the boldness of street artists' works, their originality, and the speed of execution. Once, the girl had just sat down on a small folding chair, and he had already depicted a button-like nose on a piece of cardboard in 2 to 3 strokes. Twice, and the girl was already looking at the world with the same bright eyes as the original. A stroke here, another there, and the portrait was ready, a good, real portrait. One that you could hang above the bed in a frame. On that day, which definitely seemed happy to her, she stopped at a painting depicting a tree. It seemed to be joyfully floating in space, planets tangled in its branches, and the roots merged with black emptiness, neither soil nor ground. This is the tree of life, the approaching artist said. Miss, you are so beautiful. Would you like me to draw your portrait? Thank you, but no. By the way, I am also an artist, Gabriella said. Oh, really? What are you drawing? Do I know you? Have you exhibited anywhere? He bombarded her with questions, simultaneously lulling the vigilance of the young woman. Gabriella had read that many talented and especially famous artists knew the gift of hypnosis and even possessed it on an intuitive level. By applying it in practice, they lure young individuals into their studios and turn them into models. Professional models were in short supply, and their services were expensive. Moreover, they were almost identical in type and figure, with a slight touch of vulgarity and a penchant for strong drinks. And there was a shortage of new, young faces and maidenly figures in the field of art. Gabriella read about all this, but what was it against hypnosis when he already held her hand and gently stroked her shoulder? And now she was sitting like a girl on a little chair, and he was drawing her portrait, almost not looking at the canvas, just staring into her eyes. Unfortunately, only sketches from the university years are left, Gabriella said. Why is that? The artist asked. I don't have any free time. At first, my job as a school drawing teacher took up a lot of time. Then a family, a husband, children, twins. Gabriella felt her consciousness drifting but was still trying to resist. Why? What was the point of such torment? She'd come home, and the girls would be there. Probably Ismail would pick them up from daycare. After all, why should she have dealt with all this? Such thoughts were no longer just wandering in her lovely head. They had settled there and taken root. When did this happen for the first time? Ismail asked, and the veins on his forehead were pulsating with poorly concealed anger. I don't remember. They were a year and a half, maybe 2, Gabriella said absent-mindedly. Nightmare, Ismail replied. How could I miss all this? How could I not notice it? I thought it started when they were 4. You're naive, Gabriella smirked. At 4, it was already too late to do something. I was already deeply involved with him. They met in secret, and he introduced Gabriella to alcoholic drinks and other vices. He offered her little by little to relax, loosen up, and refresh her complexion so that she looked stunning in his paintings. Then problems started, and she had to go to the hospital. He never visited her there. He said he couldn't physically stand how she looked there. It could affect his vision. But when she was discharged, he immediately appeared with a new creative idea. She was as if hypnotized by him. And yes, he was indeed rich and even a bit famous. Once, a collector bought all his paintings, paying an unprecedented price, and he was planning to move to the capital. Come with me. You are my muse, he told her. But what about the children? Gabriella asked. What children? He seemed not to understand her. Mine, I have the twins, Gabriella said. You should choose, he replied. What? She didn't understand. Understand, I'm an artist, and no children fit into my plans, especially someone else's, the man said, continuing to stare intensely into her eyes, like wounded animals or sick children. But how can I leave them? What will I tell them? Gabriella babbled. I've already figured it all out. You just need to go back to the hospital, the artist said. But I don't want to, Gabriella said. Exhibitions are waiting for us, Paris, maybe Vienna, the artist said in a languid voice, bringing the glass to Gabriella's lips. Here, have a sip. Gabriella was taken away in an ambulance, and she successfully completed the new rehabilitation course. There was one day left before her discharge when Ismail was informed of her death. But the message was false. The wealthy artist bribed everyone he needed, doctors and the head of the clinic. There was another woman in the coffin. A nameless beggar died in the clinic the day before, but it cost the artist nothing to disguise her so that everyone believed it was Gabriella. And the unfortunate and drugged Gabriella went with the famous and rich artist to the capital. She was dreaming of the fame that Gala had Salvador Dali's muse. She was dreaming of shining on canvases. He had to intoxicate her so that she had genuinely forgotten that she had children. Through the stupor that the artist constantly induced in her and the hypnotic fog, Gabriella began to think that there were no children, it was just a dream. But the capital turned out to be a dream too. There were no exhibitions and no paintings. There was only endless drunken revelry and spending time with the bohemian society. They had their own rules and customs, markedly different from the customs of ordinary people. At some point, Gabriella realized she was pregnant. She was so happy, happier than she had been in a long time living with the artist. She really wanted this little baby. Finally, she could hold a child to her chest for real, not just in her dreams. We will have a child, she told the artist. Are you out of your mind? What child? I have a creative crisis, I'm stagnant. Can't you see that since we came to the capital, I haven't painted a single picture? I thought you would be my muse, and you're pulling me down with your child. What kind of father am I? I'm a creator, I'm a god. He shouted. But even God had a son, Gabriella said. What son? Are you crazy? The artist didn't understand. Jesus Christ, Gabriella said. Ah, him? Well, yes, but God sacrificed his son, and I'll sacrifice too. You'll have an abortion. The artist exclaimed pompously. I won't even think about it, Gabriella said. Are you going to defy me? Me, a god? He shouted. You're not a god. You're talentless. You got lucky only once, and that's it, Gabriella said. Her voice carried contempt and disgust for this man. She fell silent, seemingly concluding her story. And what about the child? Ismail asked after some time. He tried not to look at Gabriella. She evoked mixed feelings in him, with pity prevailing. He felt sorry for her, truly, from the depths of his soul. A poor, unfortunate, and deceived woman fell into the clutches of a cruel manipulator. He was partly responsible for what happened to her. She was drugged, hypnotized, and subjected to psychological experiments, and he knew nothing, saw nothing, or perhaps didn't want to know. He had been working, earning money. But what good were his earnings if he couldn't safeguard and protect his beloved? Yes, he had an excuse. He tried for the sake of the children and cared about them, but he didn't take care of his wife, a woman who trusted him and loved him. Ismail was about to start crying, so he was trying not to look at Gabriella. The child, she said. There is no child. After I refused to get rid of it, he fell into an animalistic rage. How dare I argue with a god? He considered himself a god. He just discarded me, like an old broom, not because I refused to get rid of the child, but because I dared to defy him. In his stupid animal rage, the artist vented all his anger on the defenseless woman and simply threw her out onto the street without any means for living. He tossed her away like a failed project, like a rag, like a spoiled canvas, like a painting that didn't work out, and at some point, he simply realized that it would never work out. Gabriella lost the child. She had a miscarriage. She barely crawled to the hospital. They provided her with first aid and kicked her out too. No one would keep a dirty, homeless woman without insurance and a medical policy in the hospital. From that moment on, Gabriella had to wander. She collected bottles, slept in basements and shelters, spent time with the same societal outcasts, and even became one. At some point, when she sobbed up and freed herself from the artist's influence, when she realized where dreams were and where reality was, Gabriella remembered her family. She understood that her husband and daughters were not her fantasy, as that scoundrel had suggested. She realized that they were real. It was her only real life that she lost due to foolishness. Gabriella wanted to go back, but understood that it was too late. How would she look into Ismail's eyes and her daughters? What would she say to them after such a long absence? After all, they thought she was dead. Moreover, how would she get from the capital to the city where she left them? How much time has passed? Perhaps Ismail was married, and the girls had already called another woman their mother. Did she have the right to burst into their lives and create confusion there? So many years have passed. God, she didn't even know how many years exactly her relatives were sure that she was dead. No. I definitely have no right to return and seek forgiveness, Gabriella thought about herself. And she remained in the capital. Now, however, she tried to avoid any companies, communities, or homeless groups. Gabriella already knew she wouldn't find anything good there. Therefore, the woman settled in a basement where it was relatively dry and lived there very quietly and discreetly so that no one would notice. She begged for alms at the store and at churches, but it barely covered her food. Her clothing turned into rags. Gabriella was praying earnestly. Now she was trying not to talk to anyone, only to God. She didn't go to church. She was afraid. She was afraid to defile the holy place with her presence. She prayed nearby and begged for alms. The only thing she asked from the Almighty was permission to see her daughters one more time in her life. And miraculously, on a beautiful, undoubtedly, day, Gabriella saw them. They were coming out of the store where she used to beg for food. She was afraid she wouldn't recognize them, but there was no doubt it was them. How they had grown. How beautiful they had become. Gabriella was so engrossed in her girls that she didn't pay attention to Ismail. She stepped out of the shadows into the sunlight to get a better look at them. At that moment, one of the girls noticed her. And miraculously, she recognized her after so many years. They were standing and looking at each other. The girls were saying something, but Gabriella didn't hear it. She could only thank God for hearing her prayers, even though she prayed on the street, not in the temple. The main thing is that the temple should be within you, not you in the temple, Gabriella thought. She rushed to kiss the feet of her daughters and her husband. Perhaps it was appropriate to say former husband now. Gabriella almost lost consciousness when he reached out to her. She was sure that he, like many others, would push her away and say abusive words to her. But he reached out to her, put her in the car, and took her home. The girls were so happy to see her. It was the real return of the prodigal mother. She couldn't hope for more. "Perhaps you want to know about me?" Ismail asked. "I would like to, but I'm afraid I don't even have the right to wish for that," Gabriella said. "I was married," Ismail replied, "but it didn't work out. As you remember, I was convinced that I was a widower." When Ismail finally realized in time that he couldn't get drunk and become like Gabriella and that he had 2 daughters whom no one but him would help, he began to think about his future. Soon, he understood that the girls needed a second mother. Any mother, not their real one, but still. He started the search. Ismail found out that the daycare teacher, where the girls went, was unmarried, and he thought that there was no better candidate than her. He began to court her, give gifts, and invite her on dates. Of course, the girls didn't know anything about all that was happening. Theodora accepted the courtship of the lonely father, and eventually her heart melted. He proposed, and Theodora agreed. However, now they both didn't know how to tell the girls about it. The girls began complaining to their father that Theodora, their caretaker, had started treating them poorly for some reason. She scolded them more often. "Perhaps you've just been misbehaving more," the father remarked, secretly thinking that Theodora might be acting this way so that no one would suspect anything. They got married without a grand wedding. Just like with Gabriella, they submitted an application and got married at the civil registry. Now they had to tell everything to the children, but the newlywed wife was in no hurry to move into her husband's house. First, she demanded that Ismail get rid of the girls, send them to a boarding school, or even better, give them up to an orphanage. "Why would I need someone else's children when I am fully capable of bearing my own?" Theodora said. "But they are my flesh and blood, T. How don't you understand?" Ismail wondered. "How many times do I have to ask you, don't call me T? I can't stand that name. I am Theodora, and that's it. Call me like this," she said. "Don't forget, darling, that you're not in kindergarten," Ismail told her. "Perhaps I should call you by your last name, like one of your students, Theodora Santos?" This was their first and last argument. Ismail realized he had made a mistake and filed for divorce. Their marriage lasted no more than a month. The girls never found out that their dad and their caretaker got married. Now it was clear why, along with the courtship, the attitude of their carer towards the children changed. The attempt to have a second mother at home failed miserably. Ismail took the girls out of daycare, and they moved to the capital. It turned out to be a fateful decision. Ismail hired a nanny for the girls, who took care of them before and after kindergarten, and vowed not to engage in any relationships. "Your story isn't as sad as mine," Gabriella remarked after listening to him. "So what are we going to do? How will we live?" he asked his wife. "I don't know, it's up to you. I don't have a say here." "I would like to see the girls at least occasionally," Gabriella said. Ismail didn't respond. He was sitting silently, looking at one point in front of him again. It seemed like there was a struggle inside him, a battle between good and evil, as if Ismail had split into 2 halves. One told him that this had to stop and that he shouldn't have let such a woman near his daughters again. The other half said he should have forgotten everything, seizing the chance, forgiving her, and starting anew. Interestingly, it was still unknown which thought was good and which was not. But he had to make a decision here and now. Re-traumatizing the girls was unbearable, so it was genuinely easier to tell them that their mom fell from a cloud. Ismail battled with himself. Gabriella understood what was happening, so she didn't rush him. The two of them had already drunk 10 cups of coffee each and made the cafe's daily revenue. Gabriella got up and went to the counter to order a cup of milk for herself. She needed to neutralize the amount of caffeine in her body, and Ismail turned and pondered, if she comes back with a new cup of coffee, I'll just give her money and ask her not to appear in our lives. She will be able to watch the girls from a distance. But if she brings something else, I'll forgive and take her back. He was nervously watching Gabriella return, battling internally once again. One part of him said, let it be the cup of coffee, while another insisted, I wish it was something else. Interestingly, this approach is quite effective when you truly don't know what to do or what to choose. When you split your priorities within yourself, you clearly understand what you really want. The second voice won by a considerable margin. Ismail immediately understood that he wanted Gabriella to stay. What is there? Coffee again? He asked cautiously. No, milk. My head is already spinning from coffee, Gabriella replied. Then finish it, and let's go home. The girls must be waiting if their cookies haven't set the apartment on fire, Ismail said. Do they really know how to bake cookies? A delighted Gabriella asked. No, they are just learning, Ismail said. Neighbors have called the fireworkers twice already. They left the cafe as if nothing had happened, as if those 5 years of separation, darkness, and oblivion hadn't occurred, as if a family couple had just come for lunch. Gabriella was happy that Ismail forgave her, and Ismail was happy that he could forgive. They were a family again. Gabriella continued to pray, now able to enter the church peacefully. She felt that not only Ismail had forgiven her, but God had forgiven her too. Now she prayed for him to send her more children. Somehow, things weren't working out for her and Ismail. Gabriella understood it as a consequence of the miscarriage incident. She perceived it as punishment from God for losing vigilance and getting involved with that artist. At least this story taught Gabriella and Ismail to appreciate what they have here and now, to rejoice in their little joys, their growing daughters, the forgiveness they found in their hearts, and the slightly burnt lemon cookies.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.